In 1837, the king of Ahanta, Badu Bonsu II, rebelled against the Dutch colonial government and killed several officers, including acting governor Hendrik Tonneboya. The Dutch government used the Treaty of Butry as the basis for military action against Badu Bonsu, and an expeditionary force was sent to Ahanta. In the war that followed, the king was captured, sentenced for murder, and hanged. The Dutch disorganized the Ahanta state, appointing their commandant of Fort Bartenstein at Butry as regent, keeping the country and people of Ahanta under close control with an enlarged military and civilian presence. Following the execution of Badu Bonsu, his body was desecrated as a Dutch surgeon removed his head. The head was then taken to the Netherlands, where it was soon lost for more than a century. The severed head was rediscovered at the Leiden University Medical Center in the Netherlands by a Dutch author by name Arthur Japin, who had read the account of the Ahantas during a research for his 1997 novel, The Two Hearts of Kwesi Boakye, a story about an Ahanta boy brought to Holland in 1838. Japin found the head of the late king stored in formaldehyde at the LUMC. In March 2009, Dutch government officials announced that it will be returning the head to its homeland for a proper burial, a promise that was fulfilled on 23 July 2009, after ceremony held in The Hague. According to the Dutch government, Badu Bonsu II was handed over by his own nation to Dutch colonists, who were then in control of a part of the former Gold Coast that included the Ahanta tribal lands. Arthur Japin writes that the head was taken to Major General Jan Verveer in 1838 in retaliation for King Badu Bonsu's killing of two Dutch emissaries, whose heads he displayed as trophies on his throne. The Dutch-Ahanta War was a conflict between the Netherlands and the Ahanta people between 1837 and 1839, with a mere economic dispute between the Ahanta and the Dutch, who were based at the Dutch Gold Coast. The conflict ended with the hanging of Ahanta King Badu Bonsu II and the reorganization of the Ahanta state, establishing a Dutch protectorate over the Ahantas. From the time the European powers settled trading posts on the Gold Coast until the second half of the 19th century, they displayed little interest in establishing territorial control beyond the forts that they built in agreement with the local population. The Dutch were no exception in this regard, after they dislodged the Swedish African Company from the Ahanta area, in what is now the southern coast of western Ghana. They signed the Treaty of Butry with the Ahantas in 1656, which subjected the Ahanta to Dutch rule and allowed the Dutch to trade with the Ahantas from the base at Fort Bartenstein. While initially the European powers came to the Gold Coast primarily to trade in gold, the trade in slaves began to gain prominence by the second half of the 17th century. This trade came to a rather sudden halt through the passing of the Abolition of the Slave Trade Act in 1807 by the United Kingdom, which was then subsequently taken over by the Dutch by a royal decree of June 1814, and an Anglo-Dutch slave trade treaty signed again in May 1818. These changing economic situations caused tensions between the coastal peoples on the Gold Coast and the European powers with whom they were trading. Seeking a way to return their colony to a profit, the Dutch sent out a great mission to the Ashanti Empire in the Gold Coast interior in early 1837, and under the leadership of General Jan Verveer. The primary purpose of this mission was to tempt the Ashantis, with whom the Dutch had been allied since 1702, into signing a treaty allowing the Dutch to recruit soldiers for the Dutch colonial army from the Ashanti Kingdom. The eventual success of the mission was met with suspicion by other peoples of the Gold Coast. From the early 1830s, the Dutch had a difficult relationship with the king of the Ahanta, Badu Bonsu II, who had his palace at Busia. According to the official records of Naval Captain Tenkbergen and F. Duchesne, the direct cause of what would become an armed conflict between the Dutch and the Ahantas was a dispute Badu Bonsu had with the chief of Sekondi by name Etero. Etero accused Badu Bonsu of extortion, which led Commandant Smulders to summon Badu Bonsu to Fort St. Bastian. Commandant Smulders was not present at Badu Bonsu's arrival. A humiliated Badu Bonsu returned home, leading Commandant Smulders to refer the case to the governor in Elmina, Hendrik Toniboa, who on 3 separate occasions summoned Badu Bonsu to Elmina, all to no avail. Toniboa then sent the military commander of Elmina, George Mason, to Commander Adrian Kramer of Fort Buttenstein at Butry, to summon Badu Bonsu by force. Eventually, on 23 October 1837, Badu Bonsu arrived at Butry in a company of armed men, but refused to climb the hill leading to Fort Buttenstein, arguing that he wished to discuss the matter in the house of one trader by name Anthony Rule. Mason and Kramer went down to Rule's house, where an altercation followed, which left both Dutchmen dead after they had fired warning shots. When the young and inexperienced interim governor Toniboa heard of the news, he immediately assembled a force of 130 men to attack Badu Bonsu and left Elmina only 2 hours later. Without as much as a plan of attack, both of the British governor at Cape Coast and the king of Elmina pleaded with him to postpone his attack, while the commandants of both Fort St. Bastian at Shamar and Fort Orange at Sikeni warned him that his force was too small and that a large army had gathered to oppose him. Toniboa, who already had a reputation of being a hothead, would not listen. However, and on the morning of 28 October 1837, he and his army were ambushed on the beach near Takoradi. Within 30 minutes, 30 men were killed, including Toniboa himself and 4 other Dutch colonial officials. News of the onslaught reached The Hague by the end of February 1838, where it was met with shock and disbelief. General Jan Vivier, who had just returned to the Netherlands from his mission to Ashanti, was sent out again to restore order in the colony. Together with Lieutenant H.F. ten Beggen, who was second in command, he had an expeditionary force of 11 officers and 200 troops at his disposal to quell the insurrection. Also on the ships that departed for Elmina were a new governor, Hendrik Bosch, and a new administrative officer for the colony. In May 1838, the expedition landed in Elmina, where they were received by our interim governor Anthony van de Eem. After his arrival, Vivier took some time to form a coalition with other coastal peoples to attack the Ahantas. An offer by the Asantehene to send 30,000 troops was rejected, as it was seen as a ploy by the Ashantis to gain a firm grip on the coastal trade and people, but smaller offers of help by Axim and Sekeni were eventually accepted. On 30 June 1838, Vivier's force, which had been supplemented by 2,000 Elmina troops, set out to Ahanta. Badu Bonsu's messengers had in the meanwhile pled for a peaceful solution and offered up to 200 ounces of gold for Badu Bonsu's pardon. Most Ahantas, at least those not too implicated in the earlier altercations, had already submitted themselves, and the campaign, which lasted for a month, mainly involving chasing rebels and destroying Ahanta towns such as Busia and Takrad. Badu Bonsu was relinquished even before the expedition reached Ahanta mainland. Extradited by one of his people for 10 ounces of gold, he was then trialed at an ad hoc open-field court-martial and given the death sentence on July 25, 1838. He was publicly hanged on the spot where Mason and Kramer had been shot. According to Duches, Badu Bonsu's head was then severed from his body by a medical officer of Elmina by name Shillett to be preserved as a curiosity. 5 other leaders of the rebellion were subsequently hanged at Elmina on 20 August 1838. 13 others were condemned to a forced exile to the Dutch East Indies, where they were to work government coffee plantations on Nusa Kambangan, a prison island in present-day Indonesia. These men were never to be seen again. A final 36 rebels were forced to work at the coffee and cotton plantations in Elmina. Governor Hendrik Bosch then granted amnesty to the rest of the Ahanta people during his installation on 8 August 1838. In March 2009, Dutch government officials announced that the head of the late king will be returned to its homeland for proper burial. The Dutch and Ghanaian government and members of Badu Bonsu's Ahanta tribe signed a pact in The Hague for the handover of the head, which remained out of sight in a room elsewhere in the Ghanaian Foreign Ministry building for the funeral ceremony.